This is the Barry Richards Show. WBSM On Demand.
Without further ado,
WBSM presents The Barry Richards Show. Streaming live on WBSM.com and the WBSM app. Call 508-996-0500. Text us using App Chat on the WBSM app. Now, The Barry Richards Show.
There was a time when I was in a hurry as you are. I was like you. There was a day when I just had to tell my point of view. I was like you.
On a Friday afternoon, Olivia Newton-John right there, the late Olivia Newton-John, Have You Never Been Mellow, by the album of the same name. And I want to say that came out probably 74 or 5, I'm just guessing off the top of my head. Long time ago anyway, long time ago. It's hard to believe the 50s were like, the 70s were like 50 years ago, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it, it is so hard to think that I'm old enough to even remember anything that was 50 years ago. Never mind lived it, but my goodness. All right, a lot of interesting conversation for those who are just tuning in the last hour. Brian Thomas, Saturday mornings right here on WBSM from 7 until 9, Brian's Beat. And I had a conversation, and we didn't see eye to eye. And it was about the protests that are going on the college campuses around the country. And Brian thinks that the police are acting with too much force, going in and arresting students and others that are protesting. And I disagree with him vehemently. Now, he mentioned a school that he saw a video where police went in and tackled students and took them out. I didn't see that video. I'm not denying that he saw it. I'm not doubting it. If he said he saw it, he saw it. Brian is a trustworthy guy, and he's a good pal of mine. So I'm not going to question his honesty on that. I haven't seen that. I haven't even heard any allegations anywhere of police brutality. But none of that really is the issue here. Brian thinks that folks should be able to protest. He, by the way, is, and it doesn't even matter, his position on the Gaza, Hamas, Israel, it doesn't even matter. He's entitled to his opinion. But that's not what this is about. This is about private, very expensive colleges in this country that have now been occupied by students and by outside agitators. If I get a chance, I'll go over the list of some of the groups that are involved in this, but these are groups that have been around for a long time. A lot of what you see is students, because these groups recruit students. And college campuses and Ivy League schools, great place to recruit students. We've seen this happen many, many times before. Occupy, Chaz, Black Lives Matter, so on and so forth. It happens all the time. So these agitators are professionals. They're getting paid and they're paying money. They've been around for a long time. Some of them have international ties. Some are allegedly connected to Iran. A lot of them are connected to George Soros and other people who are trying to stir up political unrest. Okay, so that's nothing new either. A lot of different things going on here. What my position on this is, take a school in our conversation essentially focused on Columbia in New York, because this is where it all really hit the fan earlier this week. It's a private school. And the police chief made it clear earlier this week in New York that we do not have the authority to go onto campus and remove the students. It's private property. But if the president of the university says, we have people trespassing on our campus, would you please come in and remove them? Then the police can go in. And when the police go in a situation like that, they can't assume that these are all s'mores eating, kumbaya, pot smoking hippies from 1968. You have to assume that there are at least some folks in this crowd that are looking to harm you. And in the case of Columbia, we saw that to be the case. There were bottles thrown at police officers. Okay, so you have to assume and you have to be ready to take on whatever happens. And you are in tactical mode when you go onto the campus. So that happened this week in New York. There were a lot of arrests. My understanding is that everybody that was arrested, most of the people that were arrested, the charges have already been dropped. But regardless of whether you think somebody has a right to protest, or whether you support Hamas or whether you support Israel, the bottom line here is, we'll use, again, Columbia. Columbia is a private school. It's a private business. They have a lot of people that pay a lot of money. There's over 50,000 people that go to Columbia, right? And not all of them are out occupying the campus. A lot of folks are going to school, which they paid a lot of money for. And it's finals time. They're taking finals. They're prepping for finals and so on and so forth. Teachers work there. Not all of the teachers are out on the quadrangle, hey, hey, ho-hoing. And there's a lot of people that work there that have difficulty getting into their jobs. Some fear for their safety, particularly those who are Jewish and are hearing chants against Jews. And students are trying to study and to learn as the school year is closing out. And you cannot learn if you've got people outside of your classroom that are hey, hey, ho-hoing. And there's a possible threat to your safety while you're there. So the school asked the police to come in and clean things out, and they had every right to do so. Now, if you're there occupying and the school says it's okay, you can occupy, then you're within your rights. If the school says you are now considered to be trespassing, please leave, and you don't leave, you are making a decision. You are making a decision to defy school policy, which could get you suspended or expelled. And it also can get you arrested. Now, if you're willing to take a stand and stand up for what you believe is right, well, that's cool. But you've got to accept the fact that there are consequences. And again, consequences could include suspension, expulsion, injury, arrest, or possibly even death. Brian was talking about, well, the guys that did the tea thing, we all thought it was great. The Tea Party, we all thought it was great because we were rooting for, America against the Brits and so on and so forth. Yeah, but those guys who dressed up as Indians and threw the tea into the harbor in Boston accepted the risk that if they were caught, they were going to die for their cause. So if you're going to give me that scenario, tell me that these kids who are on campus in defiance of school policy and the police policy are prepared to die for their cause. Don't whine to me that they're being mistreated and you're being tackled. Look, you go there, you defy school policy and you defy police policy. You have to expect potentially the worst coming your way. What say you? 508-996-0500. Thank you for waiting. You're up next on WBSM.
Hey, Barry. Hey, hey, ho, ho.
Hey, hey, ho, ho.
I heard your whole dialogue with Brian, and I like Brian a lot, and my comments aren't about Brian, but he was wrong on a couple of things. I know he's been emotionally connected to Palestine since October 7th, and it was shortly after that murderous day that he was actually, talking about, are you sure there were murders? Are you sure there were beheadings? Are you sure there were babies killed and all this stuff? And it's like, okay, well, we'll just pretend that didn't happen, but 1,100 people did die, and then there were a number of people that were captured. But I think where he's wrong in this, and I think you're right in this, is that, I don't have any problem with protests, and obviously protest is part of our Constitution. The difference is under protesting, does that mean you can burn a building down? Does that mean you can loot? Does that mean you can occupy a space that you're not supposed to be in, like with a tent and camping out? I think the answer to all three of those is probably no. You can't murder anyone either, but that happens at some of these riots and or these protests, quote unquote, that turn into riots. And so I think that he's wrong about that. I understand his emotional connection. The other thing is, I got to tell you, Barry, none of these protests are going to matter the day after they end. If they all ended tomorrow or on Sunday, no one's going to care. And I'll tell you why. The conflict is between the Jews and the Palestinians, and they need to get together and figure it out because they have grievances that go back, a long, long time. And it's not going to be solved because a couple of dumb 18-year-olds are sitting in a tent, kumbaya. I'm sorry. This is all just a giant waste of their time, but they're being manipulated by a lot of other people around them. Like you said, where did all these tents come from? And there was a picture of one of the campuses. They were all the same tent. There were like 50 of them. And it was like, well, someone went to REI and just, put a check, put the credit card down. Maybe it was George Soros's surrogates or something. Gave everyone a tent to occupy. But and I'm surprised they even could figure out the instructions to put them up. But that, hey, at least they're getting through college. So I don't know what to say, Barry, but I'm sorry. I'll talk to Brian tomorrow too. But I think he's totally wrong, and I think that when the police come up and they say you have to stop now, and they're endorsed by the institution to do that, then yeah, you either get up and stop because they say to you, or you do get arrested. And if you assault a police officer, they assault you back.
You get arrested at the very least. I mean, at the very worst, you could be gassed. You could be hit with a baton. Somebody else could be throwing a bottle at one of those police officers and hit you in the face with it by mistake. You could even be killed. Somebody could fire. Who knows whether anybody in that crowd is armed? And
no, you don't know, and the police don't know.
They don't know, and that's why the police have to go in and they have to act the way that they do when they are invited in by the president of Columbia or anywhere else, and they have to move on that campus. They don't know what they're facing. And we can't just assume that everybody is, cooking marshmallows and s'mores at their tent. Some of these people are bad hombres, and they're looking for trouble. And
the fact is that a lot of the arrests were people between the ages of 25 and 30, which is post-college, not even grad school.
Right.
So, and that goes back to what you said about the George Soros crowd, coming in and, investing in the chaos. So anyway, I love Brian. He's great. And, but I think he's been on this wrong side, at least my opinion, the wrong side of this Palestinian thing since the beginning. Yeah. And I'm not sure why, but, that's his issue, not mine.
Well, Brian's history is a little bit different than yours and mine. I mean, Brian comes from a background where many people, including himself, Brian's a year older than me, so have experienced firsthand oppression and discrimination. And so he views the world slightly different maybe than you and I do. And I get that. I understand that completely. That's why I didn't get into him today about the whole debate over Hamas versus Israel. I mean, we've debated that before, and we can debate that until the cows come home, and we're probably never going to see eye to eye on that. I mean, to me, I'm really a meat and potatoes kind of guy when it comes to law and order. I'm all for protesting and everything else, but the law is the law. Once the law says you are now in violation, you have to comply, because we cannot allow society to break down into chaos. When you have chaos, everything is out of control, and people get hurt, and things get broken, and you can't exist in chaos. So it's as simple as that to me. And Don from Stoughton always had some excellent points to a conversation too, and he talked about the liability issue. There are people who fund that university, that pay good money for that university. If the president of the university says, well, you guys can hey, ho, ho all day long if you want to, and a building burns down, or, something breaks, who's liable for that? Or somebody gets injured or killed, who's liable for that?
Well, let me leave you with this. I mean, that's a great point from Don, because everything in the world, when you get to, is a contract to one extent or another. So if you make a contract with the university, I'm going to pay you $400,000 over 4 years, and I want to get my education, but that education is stopped. A group of students could easily sue the institution and say, you did not provide what you was supposed to be on this contract. I lost 2 weeks of education because you weren't able to control the campus, and I want my money back. Now, that could easily happen, because all of these, when you sign the line, that is a contract, and you're expecting to get what you expect when you go to the college. So I totally agree.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. 508-996-0500 is the number. Thanks for hanging on. You're up next in WBSM.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Well, the real Brian, please stand up, Barry. You know what I'm saying, Barry? We're killing bees here. But situation that you ever get pulled over by a policeman or state trooper?
Yes.
Okay. So if you get pulled over by law enforcement and they tell you to do something, like get out of your car, put your hands up, what would happen if you said, hell no, I'm not getting on my car, I'm not raising my hands just because you told me so? What would happen? They would call back up, maybe take you out of the car, pull you off. And then what do they call that? Resisting arrest, right?
Well, Paul, how many people have been killed in this country by doing exactly that? And then we turn around and say racist cops, or whatever. You get somebody with an attitude that says, well, I'm not going to do what you told me because, I feel as though you're picking on me simply because I'm a black male or whatever. So I'm going to walk away and I'm not going to do that. And the cops yelling, put your hands up, stop, whatever. And they wind up getting shot. Or, they go to reach for something and the cops think it's a gun or whatever. And people get it. If you cooperate and you do what the law tells you to do, if you don't do that, then you have to accept the risk that you are putting potentially your life on the line for your cause.
Right. And Brian brought up a thing about, they saw a video. But what happened before that video? How many chances was the cops giving those people to leave? So there's no... Yeah, the video says, so they took action or maybe attack those people. But how many times were they told to get up and leave? We don't know that. So, and then the cops are getting a bad rep because they're going into a situation where it could be a riot. Okay, you got 50 cops versus 300, 400 people. If they get out of hand, you're talking about a massive riot. So they have to go there anticipating that there's going to be something going on or they're going to resist arrest, but people are not going to be moving. So you get a major riot situation.
Yeah.
Those cops are going into that type of mental attitude that something might happen. If they went in there and said, kumbaya, and they just had their hands behind their back, then they're not doing their job because they have to go in there.
Well, look, first of all, these police officers have a right to go home to their families at night, okay? They have a right to go home. When their shift is over, they have a right to punch out, go home, and kiss their babies and do whatever they want to do with their wife or whatever. They have a right to do that. So when something like this happens and you have the university say to the police, these folks are trespassing, we want them removed, please come in and remove them. The whole situation changes at that point. First, you go to the students and you say, look, you're trespassing. We're giving you until 6 o'clock to get out of here. Collect your belongings and get out of here. If you defy that order, we've got to come in and remove you. Okay, they don't just come storming in with the bulldozers and start ripping everybody apart. They give you a certain amount of time. Collect your belongings, think about it, talk about it, get out of here. And if you don't, we've got to come in and get you. Now, these people, these police officers, they have no idea what they're facing. Once they enter that college campus, they don't know who's armed with lead pipes. They don't know who's got a gun. They don't know who's got knives or explosives or what. So they have to act as though their lives are in jeopardy, and they generally are. And so they have to... You don't go in with force. You don't go in with your clubs swinging or whatever, but you've got to be prepared for the worst. And if people are resisting arrest and now you're seeing bottles flying and everything else at you, then you've got to break out the cuffs and you've got to start arresting people and you got to take them out. It's as simple as that. You can protest. You can have whatever position you want in this country. We are a fabulous country for that, but you cannot do it outside of the law. And the problem is, Paul, we've seen this happen too often. We see it happen in places like Baltimore, and we saw it happen in, where was the Gentle Giant? Ferguson. We see it happen in the summer of 2020, where the politicians tell the police, Boston, Providence, let's just give them some space to burn off some steam. No. That is a mistake. You do not do that. You have to do what they did in Texas this week at the University of Texas, what Governor DeSantis did in Florida this week when they tried to shut down the bridge there. You have to immediately invoke the law and show them who's in charge, because if you give in, you give them space, then you lose control. Once you lose control, you have chaos and it's all over. Thank you, Paul. I got to hit a break. Let me do the break. We'll come right back after this. 8:30 on a Friday afternoon. 508-996-0500 is the phone number. And if you give me just a minute here, I do need to address this. I did do some research, and you need to know this, that we're not talking here about just a bunch of pimply-faced kids who, think that they are so plugged into the world affairs that they need to go out and occupy campuses and so on. These are people who are being influenced by groups, professionals, some of them paid, international organizers, and so on and so forth. Kids are very impressionable, 18, 17, you want to belong to a cause. And, look, we were all that age, right? I mean, we were at that age around the Vietnam War, so there's a lot of activism that went on back when we were growing up. There's no question about it. But let me just tell you what I've learned, and this is from News Nation. And look at who's organizing pro-Palestine protests in the U.S. News Nation writes, Columbia University students hold continued protests calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and divestment from Israel. The demand has its roots in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS movement, a decades-old campaign against Israel's policies toward the Palestinians. By the way, the squad members in Congress all support this group and have come under fire for it before. It's it's boycott, divest, and sanctions, BDS. The movement has taken on new strength as the Israel-Hamas war surpasses the 6-month mark. But there are several organizations apart from the school groups who are supporting the pro-Palestine movement, calling for many of the same changes that students nationwide are. On Tuesday night, a group called Within Our Lifetime held a protest outside the walls of Columbia, calling for resistance by any means necessary. The demonstration illustrated the scope of pro-Palestine protests taking place beyond college, beyond the college classroom and the college campuses. Within Our Lifetime is just one of the vast network of organizations that have coordinated protests that have blocked highways, delayed trains, and shut down parts of college campuses all across the country for the last few months. The New York City-based pro-Palestine group is led by Nurdin Kiswani, a 29-year-old who founded the group nearly a decade ago to build a community for young people who want to raise awareness about the Palestinian cause. So this is a non-student at Columbia organizing what's happening at Columbia. The grassroots movement includes localized efforts to coordinate protests and events through encrypted apps like Telegram, WhatsApp, and Instagram. I just support the Palestinian people as a whole, and I believe that we have the right to resist, Kiswani told NBC. If they're mad at it, they can talk to Biden, they can talk to the Secretary of State, they can talk to the elected officials who keep funding wars abroad, who keep funding death and killing in our name with our tax dollars. This piece on News Nation goes on to say, if I can flip the page here, while the group is not directly associated with the protests taking place on the campuses, their objectives are intertwined. Now, among the most enthusiastic and active pro-Palestine organizations are Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, Jewish Voice for Peace, JVP, the Palestinian Youth Movement, PYM, and American Muslims for Palestine, AMP. These are just some of the groups that make up the network of anti-Israel and anti-Zionist organizing bodies across the country. Organizing bodies, and that's important to understand. Several pro-Palestine organizations operating around the country include Within Our Lifetime, do not have public tax filings, according to an NBC investigation. Instead, they use a progressive New York-based nonprofit group called Westchester People's Action Coalition Foundation, or known as Westpac, as their financial sponsor to collect and process online donations. tax laws allow nonprofit groups with a 501c3 status to collect money on behalf of smaller organizations. So see, all of this money is being collected locally, and it's being funneled through a progressive New York-based nonprofit, the Westchester People's Action Coalition Foundation, and then the money is being distributed from there. Other groups have been funded by major U.S. foundations. If Not Now has received $100,000 in the past 5 years from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. The organization's stated goal is to end U.S. support for Israel's apartheid system. The fund also awarded close to $500,000 to Jewish Voice for Peace, another Palestinian rights organization, over the same period. Amid the recent wave of demonstrations, both on and off college campuses, Jonathan Schanzer, who's a former Treasury Department official, said the organizing parties are not organic, but cultivated by potentially dangerous groups. He says, and I quote, "They're extremely organized. There are a lot of the Islamist-leaning groups that I think many of us have come to expect here," Schanzer told News Nation. These are not spontaneous. They are not necessarily organic. They are cultivated by groups that have an axe to grind. Back in November, Schanzer called for a more aggressive investigation of ties between pro-Palestinian groups in the U.S. and terrorist organizations in his testimony to Congress. Republican senators heard testimony from Schanzer back in the fall. Individuals who previously worked for Hamas charities are now driving force behind the large pro-Hamas demonstrations taking place in major cities across America, said Schanzer, citing Hatem Bazian, a longtime lecturer at the University of California, Berkeley, as an example. Bazian founded the national branch of SJP to focus on campus-based activism and later launched AMP. Schanzer claimed Bazian and his organizations are part of a network that is providing training, talking points, materials, and financial support to students intimidating and threatening Jewish and pro-Israel students on college campuses. You're guilty because you are passed by someone who is eating a shawarma, who is connected to somebody who lives in Gaza, who knows somebody who might be a member of Hamas, Bazian said. That's basically where we are at. And then there was a piece in the New York Post as well that ran, I believe it was today or yesterday. George Soros is paying student radicals who are fueling nationwide explosion of Israel-hating protests. And I'm not going to read the entire story, but just a couple of quick excerpts. Soros and his hard left acolytes are paying agitators who are fueling the explosion of radical anti-Israel protests at colleges around the country. The protests, which began Columbia University, have mushroomed nationwide, copycat 10 cities, happening everywhere. All of them organized by branches of the Soros-funded Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP. And some students clashed with police. Soros is paying agitators who are fueling the explosion of radical anti-Israel protests at colleges across the country. The SJP parent organization has been funded by a network of nonprofits, ultimately funded by, among others, Soros, the billionaire left-wing investor. At 3 colleges, the protests are being encouraged by paid radicals who are fellows, quote-unquote, of a Soros-funded group called the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. The U.S. campaign provides up to $7,800 for its community-based fellows and between $2,880 and $3,660 for its campus-based fellows in return for spending 8 hours a week organizing campaigns led by Palestinian organizations. So these groups and these organizers on campus are being paid thousands of dollars to organize these protests and recruit students, including your dumb kids. They are trained to rise up to revolution. The radical group received at least $300,000 from Soros Open Society Foundation since 2017 and also took in $355,000 from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund in 2019. As George Soros and Wall Street moguls financed radical anti-Israel groups behind campus protests at Columbia University, according to the New York Post story. It has 3 fellows who have been major figures in the nationwide protest movement. Nida Laffey, a former president of the University of Texas Students for Justice in Palestine, was seen at an encampment at UT Dallas on Wednesday, making a speech demanding an end to the war in Gaza. Laffey, a former legislative intern for the late Democrat Congresswoman Edie Bernice Johnson, graduated from the school last year with a degree in global business and is now a law student at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. Laffey returned to the University of Texas Dallas campus on Wednesday to lead a teach-in at the Students for Justice Palestine Occupation on the college lawn. She is paid as a fellow by a group backed by George Soros. So she's paid to go to these schools and to agitate and to get people all worked up. And this goes on and on and on. But you can find this stuff online. Just simply do a search on who is funding the college protests, and you'll find some great, interesting information. 508-996-0500. Thanks for waiting. And next on WBSM.
Thank you, Barry, for taking my call.
Appreciate you calling.
So I haven't called in a while. I wanted to call you back in early April when I was going into work. It's a little off topic, but I just want to quickly bring up about what you're talking about today is do these people, like these white privilege, as they might be called, do they even realize, like, what they are supporting? I mean, I don't know if anybody brought that up, but they're actually supporting a terrorist group with, and all these LGBTQ people are all chanting all this stuff.
Well, do you remember back during the Reagan years when we were talking about the Nicaraguan Contras and all of that? One man's freedom fighter was another man's terrorist. So there's that mentality there, and the same with the IRA in England and Ireland back during the day as well. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So these kids are being taught by the people that I just mentioned. That are coming on these campuses, and they're teaching these kids that these are not terrorists; they're freedom fighters.
Right, and so, but do they don't even understand what they're talking about? Because if you are found to be gay or homosexual, whatever, in these countries, they throw you off of buildings. They'll cut your throat. They murder you, so. And what was that thing that would, if you look it up, I don't know if you heard about they had drag queen hour up in Amherst or whatever. Where it was a guy there.
Yeah, Northampton. We talked about it yesterday. Yeah, if you're happy and you know it, shout Free Palestine. Yeah.
Yes, but there was also, so you can look up another, it's going throughout the whole country where it wasn't even about gay rights or any of this going on. It was an LA school teacher, a lady, having the kids chant around inside the classroom, "No more Trump, no more." I mean, what more? This is like Germany, 1930s, all over again. And
you got a captive audience because you got parents out there that are dimwits that are bringing their kids first of all to a drag queen story hour, which. In and of itself should result in you losing your children, but and then when you bring them there, it started out nice and simple. A guy dressed up as a woman reading to children, and then all of a sudden you got guys dressed up as women rolling on the floor, letting the kids grab their fake boobs. And
yes, I mean, I don't understand. I mean. I'm sorry to say, but you can question where the parenting skills are on some of these people, because if my daughter, I'm so thankful because Barry, I don't think I would have been able to handle myself with all this going on. If I would have saw that, I would have pulled my kid out. But if I would have known there was some drag queen stuff going on, there's a big story right now. I believe it was in. You got to look it up, Barry. It's in Watertown, Mass. Okay, they're talking about it was a student. Okay, they kept it from the parents that this person, I'm assuming it was a male. He had a hit list of the kids he wanted to kill or hurt or whatever, and it was kept from the parents. And the parents found out finally, and this was in January. Barry, you can look it up. It was brought up today on a different radio station I listened to out of Boston, and they were talking about it that this student in January in Watertown, and now they're catering. The superintendent is saying, to the parents, like belittling them. Oh, you got to be more sympathetic to them, and they let that student go back to school. Like, how are you going to let this kid go back to school knowing that what's going to happen? That's red flags. Like, what are you going to wait for when he hurts somebody?
Well, and that's the thing. Well, that's exactly what happens. I mean, how many times have we seen these school shootings where the FBI has already interviewed these people and so on and so forth and missed all the red flags. School officials, the same thing, and next thing you know, they're coming to school and they're blowing everybody up. So no, it's absolutely crazy. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. It was good to hear from you again. I got to take a break though. 508-996-0500. We're coming right back.
You on the wireless back in 52, lying awake intently tuning in on you. If I was young, it didn't stop you coming through. They took the credit for your second symphony, rewritten by machine on new technology, and now I understand the problems you could see. I met your children. What did you tell them?
Video killed the radio star.
All right, welcome back to the program. It goes to about 1980, if I remember correctly, and that was the Buggles and Video Killed the Radio Star. That was the very first song, the very first video ever played on MTV. So there you go. How's that for trivia? Very first song, Video Killed the Radio Star. And it's kind of funny because here we are like 40 some odd years later, and the radio star is still working on MTV. When was the last time you saw a video on MTV, right? I can't remember the last time that I saw a video on MTV. So I guess video didn't kill the radio star after all, right? 508-996-0500 is our phone number. And great conversation today. And I know some of you have a difference of opinion with Brian, as did I today. Brian will be here tomorrow from 7 until 9. And Brian's beat. You can call and give him hell. Don't be nasty or rude or whatever. Just call and disagree and challenge him on his point of view. And so I know Brian's going to be talking about all of this. The anti-Jewish pro-Hamas protesters that have been impacting college campuses around the country will be subject to expulsion if they do the same at Florida universities, according to Governor Ron DeSantis. DeSantis said, you think about what happened when you have these Hamas demonstrators out. They're taking over bridges and they're taking over roads, he said, noting that these individuals do not have the right to do that. And that is a fundamental misunderstanding that a lot of folks have. I have a right to protest. This is America. Oh, you absolutely do have a right to protest. No question about it. But you do not have a right to disrupt the rest of society. You don't have a right to do this. And the problem is we have seen it happen too often where the police, on orders from on high, refuse to offend these protesters. Yeah, we got to let them work it out of their system. Just cordon off this neighborhood and let them go in there, and they can burn and they can loot and they can rob or they can close the bridge or whatever, and we'll let them get it out of their system and it'll all be over. Governor DeSantis says ain't happening here, and he's right. Law and order isn't about being a big, tough jackboot. It's about maintaining stability and civility in your society, because without stability and civility, you have chaos. And that's exactly what we're seeing happening in these blue cities and blue states. 508-996-0500, you're next in WBSM.
Hey, good afternoon, Barry. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Hey, you know how we could have prevented all of this, including the protests?
How?
If we minded our own business and worried about what's going on in our own country other than always sticking our noses in other people's problems.
So we should not have defended Israel?
I don't think so. Israel has a strong military. They can defend themselves.
Well, where does Israel get its strong military from? A lot of it is from its friends in the world, including us.
Including us, exactly. So
yeah.
We've done plenty. They should.
So we stopped defending Israel and let Israel's foes just annihilate it and destroy it?
I mean, not necessarily, but they
Well, what do you think is going to happen? Look what just happened 2 Saturday nights ago when Iran fired 300 missiles and drones at Israel. If we just minded our business and didn't shoot down these drones and missiles, Iran might have decimated Israel and wouldn't even be around today.
We weren't talking about Iran. We're talking about Gaza.
Who do you think is funding the warfare in Gaza?
No, correct. But I'm saying Gaza does not have a military to protect themselves. So Israel.
Well, yeah, it does. It doesn't have an army because it's not a nation, but it has a terrorist organization that's pretty much running the government, and it has Iran that is funding its. Look, the thousands of rockets fly into Israel every week from the north that are being fired by Hezbollah, from the south that are being fired over the border from Gaza. If Israel didn't have allies to help defend it, Israel would have been obliterated a long time ago.
And I understand that, again, but in this particular situation, we're talking about a situation that, Israel could have easily defended itself.
How could Israel have easily defended itself? It was attacked on October 7th in the most heinous way possible. 1,200 Israelis and Americans were killed on October 7th. Americans were killed, too. It wasn't just Israelis. Americans were killed there. So we just turn our back and say, well, those Americans shouldn't have been there. We're minding our business.
No, I just see it as, again, we're constantly worried about everybody else's issues.
Well, we have to. You defend your friends, don't you? You defend your family members and your friends when somebody threatens them, don't you?
Not when we can defend ourselves, and not when. So
you don't. So if your friend is being threatened, you're going to defend yourself and run and leave your friend to get his ass kicked?
No, if my friend can defend himself, I'm going to let him defend himself. And that's what we're talking about. This particular issue is the whole Gaza-Israel conflict. And
I'm not sure that you entirely understand the situation here, but I don't have time to really get to relitigate it because I got to move on. Quick break.
Now don't touch the knobs because I think we're going to have some fun with this one here.
All right, welcome back to the program. Jay Giles Band from 1973. They were from Boston, Jay Giles Band. And we're going to get out of here for the weekend and make room for Howie Carr, who's coming up next. And I'm sure Howie's going to have a lot more to say about this, the Trump trial today. And Biden, we kind of lost in the craziness of everything else that's going on. But Joe Biden today on the Howard Stern show saying that he will debate Trump. Trump's already responded on Truth Social saying he probably doesn't mean it, but anytime, any place, any day, any location, whatever, I'm ready for him. So we'll see.